welcome back, and today I'm going to be talking to you all about the gardening jobs that you can do in October. And I can't believe it's October already, to be honest. This year's gone really quickly, and I started this in April and now it's October. That's quite crazy. And there might not be as much to do this month, but there's still enough to keep you busy, just like last month. There's not as much as there was in midsummer, but there's also not as much as there will be in the peak of winter. So let's get started with the video. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that you've gone down below, hit the little subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon to make sure you're notified next time I upload a video. And one of the first things I'm going to talk about that you can do in October is to clear out all the plants that are dying and finishing. And it can be a bit like a funny month, because everything that you've planted and cared for in the summer is starting to come to an end. You're getting less harvest, and it can be quite sort of sad and a bit weird seeing all of your plants that you've been eating dying off. But this is something that we have to do, and we have to cut them all back to the ground and just cut the stem right to the ground, like I'm going to show you in a minute with my broad beans. And what this does then is it leaves the roots, especially with the legumes, they have little nitrogen fixing bacteria in the nodules of their roots. So if you leave their roots in the ground, they'll feed the nitrogen they've transferred from the air, or the nitrates. They'll leave them in the ground ready for next year's crops. And I have only got really broad beans at the moment that are finished, but I'm sure there will be a lot more in the next month or two. So now let's show you how I get rid of my broad beans. So if you're no dig, just like I am, then if you're no dig, just like I am, then you won't want to disturb your soil. So all you'll need for this is some secateurs and a bucket to transfer them into the compost. And what you do is you just cut the stems at the ground, just like that, and then chop them up pretty into about that much, just for the compost. And then I just do this with all of the ones that, in fact all of these broad beans are looking a bit sorry for themselves, so I'll just do this for them all. And then once we've cut all of these down, what I'm going to do later on in the episode is I'm going to be putting a good layer of homemade compost, or as much as I've got at the moment, down on here to feed back into the soil. And if there's not enough, then I'll just top it up when the next batch of compost is ready. So as I was just saying, you want to leave the broad bean roots in the ground because they have something called nitrogen fixing bacteria in the root nodules, which turns the nitrogen from the air into nitrates, which they need in the ground. And actually I've sacrificed my no dig in about maybe 10 square centimetres to show you these root fixing bacteria. And actually on this it's a really good example, because you can see the root nodules are really big, and you may not be able to see that. I'll do a close-up for you to see, but they're actually really big, and inside there are the nitrogen fixing bacteria, which are doing all of the chemical reactions that change the nitrogen from the air into nitrates in the ground, which is what the plant uses to make its broad beans that you eat. So the second thing that's very important to keep on top of in October, I nearly said August then, that's how quickly the year's gone, is to keep the bases of plants weed free. And I'm just going to chuck these over there. And this is to keep all of the nutrients in the ground dedicated to the plants that you're growing, so that there's no competition with the plant that you're growing, because that's what plants compete for, is they compete for nutrients and light and sometimes shelter, depending on plants. So that's why we need to keep the bases free of weeds. And this one's actually quite good, because I recently mulched this with some really good compost that I had left over, so all of that should be okay. But with other things, you may still need to keep on top of the weeds at the bases, such as runner beans, because they're still in season here, or brassicas, because they're something that's coming into season very soon. But there'll be more about that later on in the episode again. And don't feel like you have to do all the weeding by hand around the bases. You can use a hoe, just like this oscillating hoe that I've got, which will be linked down below, and you can just use this. I know I've got a mulch on here, but just to scrape the subsurface of the soil to get rid of any weeds that are existing before you put your mulch on, because then they'll be weakened and they should ideally rot down with the mulch so that you can have really good soil next year. And as I said earlier on, I'm going to be mulching this bed now with some homemade compost that you would have seen me make a few episodes ago. So this isn't enough to cover the whole bed, but I'm just going to cover this end down here because this hasn't been mulched in a year. And you may think that this homemade compost isn't ready, which technically, by the book, it isn't. However, I'm just going to use it because I'm not planting anything in this bed now over winter, so it'll just break down the rest of the way on the bed, which will be fine. And I like to spread it around with my foot because it's easy. So you could use something like this again, or maybe a soil or landscaper's rake, but I just use my feet if I've got wellies on. And that will be left here, this bed like this, probably until spring next year now, until I plant something else, because I'm not planting any onions in here this year because they were planted in here last year and I want to do a bit of crop rotation, so they'll be planted down next to the runner beans. And if you don't want any weeds to grow in your bed over winter, you can reuse old compost bags and cover them over the soil, weight them down. And this is a bit of a weed membrane hack because you don't have to buy any and you're recycling plastics. And if you're growing onions or garlic over winter this year, you'll want to get them in by mid-October, like I did here. And if you want to know how to do that quite well and how to successfully start growing onions from sets, then you can check out my video from last week, which will be up here or here, can't remember where, but it'll come up on one of those cards. If you click on that, then I'll show you step by step what you need to do to grow your very own onions from sets just like this. Something that's very easy to forget in the moment is to water your greenhouse, because I've made this mistake last year and probably I would have done the year before if I had a greenhouse, and that is to keep watering your tomatoes or whatever you've got growing in your greenhouse into winter, and as long as they're cropping, because I last year forgot and they went all a bit funny and messy, and it's very easy to forget. I can't get the door open. But yeah, it's very important to remember this because otherwise they'll dry out and then they probably won't grow again, or they won't ripen all their fruit. So we need to encourage them as much as we can to finish ripening their fruit that they've already got on them before winter, so we can have our last taste of the greenhouse harvest until next year. And actually I brought my peppers into our front porch where we've got double glazed windows. I brought them in yesterday and the day before, and I've put them on little saucers on the windowsill, and that's because it gets a lot warmer and stores the heat better in there, and in here it gets very cold at night. And actually I woke up this morning, and not in here but outside here, when I woke up it was actually 5 degrees outside, which is quite scary, and I think there'll probably be a surface frost very soon. And October is still a very abundant month of harvests. For example, the runner beans, they'll probably finish this month, but you'll still get a good harvest out of them. And now is when you start going from late summer and summer crops, and they start transitioning into the brassicas and the winter veg. So for example, I'll probably get my first cabbage harvest very soon, or kale, or we've been harvesting kale through the summer, but a lot more kale will be part of our harvest. And courgettes and squashes will probably finish this month too, but there's still time for them to grow, and especially if you've got a polytunnel or greenhouse, they'll keep growing a bit longer. I've still got a lot of courgettes coming and they're still flowering, so I'm hopeful. And there's also my first butternut squash has actually set, and it's probably about that big now. And our Swedes in this bed here, they're growing quite well, so we'll probably harvest them soon. And as things start to be harvested, like the tomatoes, like I was just saying, are just finishing to ripen their last fruit. So what you should keep doing, as well as watering in your greenhouse, is feeding your greenhouse, because it's easy to forget in winter it rains a lot, especially in Wales in the UK, so you don't want to water the outside stuff, but then that makes you forget to water the inside stuff. So make sure you keep watering any indoor plants or anything that's growing in a greenhouse, because that's vital for them to finish off their cropping. And something that you might forget is that the first frost is on its way, and it definitely is here. As I said, it was 5 degrees when I woke up this morning outside, so I'm going to have to make sure that everything's covered with either Enviromesh, fleece, or mini polytunnel like this. This one is at its full length at the moment. It can actually go up to 3.5 metres, so it could cover the whole of this bed at the side here. But I've got it here at the moment because under here I've got, under the condensation, I can see I've got my winter autumn king carrots growing. I've got my broccoli, not my broccoli, I've got my cabbage, sorry. I've got my Swedes, and I've also got some other carrots that haven't been harvested yet. So make sure you cover your plants when it starts getting cold to prevent this happening. You do know it's going to freeze today, don't you? Oh no, they're not, are they? Oh no, it's not going to freeze. I haven't covered my plants. Ah! I can sleep happy because I've covered all of my plants with fleece and mini polytunnels. So thank you for watching that video. I really hope you did enjoy it just as much as I've enjoyed making it. So if you did, please go down below and hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And like the video and comment to let me know what you thought of this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.